and the discussions are still ongoing, but that is one of the areas that we're having discussions with the government.
I know that some Nigerians have argued that America does a lot of diplomatic conversation and all that, but when you quantify in terms of deliverables, that at times it's difficult. Is that true?
I would disagree with that completely.
No, it would be good to hear.
I think, let me just say that we believe dealing with terrorism here in Nigeria and elsewhere requires many more tools than security tools. For example, we think that development issues are important in the north, so that Boko Haram is not attractive to populations who are disaffected. We have a very robust AID program providing development, and we are working with the government to assist in the delivery of development assistance in the north as well. I can't give you the figure off the top of my head of exactly what that amounts to.
You were just going into my brain just now because I was thinking Nigerians love numbers. If you had said that we've spent $2 billion, then that would be something for us to hold on to.
I can promise you we did not spend $2 billion. But I would say in the millions of dollars we are supporting the government, and I'm sure somewhere in the material that I have with me is the exact figure, but I don't have it in my head.
Okay, so what time frame are we looking at for this training that you're talking about?
We're looking at immediately. Part of my team, I came with a very senior team. I was accompanied by the commander of AFRICOM, the national security advisor to the president on Africa, the Africa head of USAID, the Deputy Secretary of Defense for Africa. So it was a high-level team, and we come with a lot of possibilities and resources. One of the things that I offered up, and again, these are intangibles, but a question came up concerning legislation that allows the government to address terrorism, that there's not the necessary legislative framework. And so I offered that we can work with the government on developing that legislation. And so when I go back to Washington, that's one of the things on my agenda that I will deliver on.
Okay. Now let's look at Africa at large. What is America's policy regarding Africa?
I think we have a very strong long-term and abiding partnership with Africa. President Obama has laid out a strategy that looks at Africa in a very positive light. We want to see development. We want to see energy. We want to see a partnership with the African people where it's an equal partnership. So when President Obama was in Africa this year in June, he announced 3 major initiatives.
Well, I should quickly add that he did not stop in Nigeria.
And there are about 30 other countries that have that same complaint. So I can't answer that, but
we always regard ourselves as the giant of Africa.
And I actually agree with you that you are the giant of Africa.
That's heartwarming.
Yes. But during that visit, he announced 3 big initiatives. Power Africa, for which Nigeria is one of the 6 countries to participate. Nigeria was selected because Nigeria has made some major progress in privatizing the energy sector. President Obama made the point that 85% of Africa lives without regular electricity. And electricity is really the engine of growth. It's the most important infrastructure you can have if you want investment. And so Power Africa will start the process of addressing many of these issues. And while we only selected 6 countries, the hope is, in the case of Nigeria, for example, as Nigeria develops its energy sector, that it will impact on the countries that are surrounding Nigeria. The second initiative he announced was Trade Africa. Trade Africa will focus specifically on East Africa, on the East Africa community, looking at how those countries in the East African community can improve trade between themselves, but also trade with the United States. At the same time, we're also looking at trade relationships across the continent As you know, the AGOA initiative is one that is very much loved and appreciated in Africa because it provides trade incentives and customs benefits to African businesses to import into the United States. Nigeria is a huge beneficiary of AGOA, as are many of the other AGOA eligible countries. So we'll be looking at how we can boost trade, and again, not just trade between the United States and Africa, but trade between African countries. And we have a number of trade hubs across the continent to support that. And then third, the most important one is the Young African Leadership Initiative. I did a program on this when I was in Abuja this week. I hope to do a similar program here in Lagos. This is an initiative that started 2 years ago. We brought a group of young leaders from across Africa. They had a seminar with the president. This year has a Washington leadership portion, and we will bring about 500 young African leaders from across the continent to the United States for a 6-week leadership program where they will have internships with universities in the United States, and then in with a summit in Washington with the president, and then they come back here, and we look to them to develop leadership networks and youth councils across the continent so that they can start preparing themselves for taking on leadership roles in the future. This is the continent in which let me not overestimate, 65% of Africa's population is 35 and under. And I think I saw something where Nigeria, 50% are 25 and under. Huge, huge youth bulge. And at some point, people like you, gray-haired, are not going to be around.
Yeah.
And we need to make sure that this continent is preparing their young people to take on leadership roles, not just in the private sector, but in the public sector, in the non-governmental sector, in the academic sector. So this is a big initiative. We're starting with 500. Our hope is to build that number to 1,000 next year, but we know that each one of those young people will have impacts on hundreds of other people who will be within their scope. And hopefully this will be a major legacy for us on the continent.
Now, Power Africa. Yes. I mean, that is very important. I mean, that would have been music to the ears of Nigerians. Yes, the sector has been privatized, but nothing is happening yet. So what role does your government intend to play in giving us power? Because we're all now, let's hear what it is that they intend to do.
It's a partnership, and it's a partnership between the United States government, the private sector, and the countries who are involved. So we're looking for a major, major contribution of the private sector. And here in Nigeria, the private sector, they've raised their hands and they've stood up and have made major investments already. We're not going to see Power Africa light up overnight.
No.
This is a major, major undertaking, and it's going to take years to see the fruits of. But we're hoping that we start bearing fruit early. And
How early is early?
I think we've already seen it in Nigeria with the privatization. Because part of the problem with power in Africa is that if the power industry is in the hands of government, then it doesn't make money.
No.
And if it doesn't make money, it's not efficient. And if it's not efficient, it means people are not getting electricity. So in the hands of the private sector, where they want to make money, they have a vested interest in making sure it's successful. That's the first step, and that's already started to happen here in Nigeria. So I think you're going to see the fruits of this rather quickly.
soon.
The question I'll be asking you is, we look at what is happening in the private sector now with regards to power. And I went through a list of companies that are currently owning the generating companies and the distribution companies and working on the transmission as well. And I noticed that there are quite a lot of them having Chinese companies as part of the consortium. And I am not seeing a lot of American companies
Well,
involved.
actually, there are American companies who have expressed an interest and who are